So I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. And today we're starting a series of interviews with people who are experts in the fountain pen community. I'm going to hand it over to Andrew Wong, who has been doing a lot of interviews for me and kind of co-host now of Drawing with Fountain Pens. And he's going to introduce Jonathan Steinberg.
Yep, thank you. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Steinberg. He is an international lawyer who is obviously also a leading expert on fountain pens. He has experience as an organizer for fountain pen shows around the world, which have included New York City, Milan, Bologna, and is also considered a collectibles expert and has been seen on CNBC, NBC, BBC, and is a collectibles advisor to USA Today and Forbes magazine. He's an author of two great fountain pen books. We've got Fountain Pens, A Collector's Guide, and as well as Fountain Pens, Their History and Art, which Jonathan was kind enough to autograph for me. This one here I have to bring to our next show, so you can sign this one for me too.
I'll do it.
What got you into fountain pens? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from when I was at school. I'd always written with them, and I always liked the idea of the nibs making the handwriting look different. So if you wrote for a couple of months with a thin nib, you changed to a broad nib, your handwriting would look different, and vice versa. I forgot about it for about 10, 15 years. Then my mother, who deals in antiques and fine arts, would buy a job lot of jewelry. Lying in a box at the bottom would be a fountain pen
Oh,
occasionally. So I built up a collection of two or three of the things. And one day I broke one. It was a 9 carat gold waterman's safety from the First World War with some kind of mystical inscription on the side. And I managed somehow as a safety pen to break the spiral, but I didn't realize there was a spiral in there. So I did a lot of research trying to figure out where you can get a spiral fix in England in the 1970s for a 1920s pen. By the time I finished doing my research, I discovered that I had an interest in the subject. My mother
oh,
would buy occasionally more job lots of jewelry, and there'd been other fountain pens in there. Eventually, I went along to auctions that were being held by Christie's in South Kensington and London of fountain pens, where I got to meet other collectors. All my pens looked very impressive in their gold and silver and filigreed splendor. And in the land of the blind, one I managed considered to be a bit kinky. So they all thought I knew about fountain pens.
hmm.
That's how I got interested in the subject. Then I would take my fountain pens, and whenever I was sent to appear in court in some foreign country, I'd try and arrange for the appearance to be over to encompass a weekend. And I used to go flea marketing where I'd meet other collectors from those countries.
So this is in the 1970s.
Yes, in the mid
Uh,
1970s.
there seems to be a kind of resurgence of interest in fountain pens in the 1970s. I just anecdotally in high school, all of a sudden everybody was using fountain pens for a brief period of time.
Whereas in the 60s, that pen companies, not the big ones, but the minor ones, were pushing getting students and schools around the country to write with fountain pens.
Well, I've been very curious about your pens. I presume a lot of the pens that you feature in your books is from your own collection.
I'd like to think so, but unfortunately not. Most
Well,
of
you
them
do
look like,
have a number that I've seen
oh
in your
yes,
shows and when we've met up that I've been very enamored with. You have one that has the gold overlay that that we tried
yes.
out, and I think you mentioned the funny thing is that even though it is a really uh, expensive pen, that I think it is one of your daily writers. So I was curious, maybe you could show us some of the interesting pens and the meaningful pens in your collection.
Yes, of course, I'd love to. Well, the difficulty is knowing where to start.
So the pens in your book, they come from various fountain pen collectors that you've met along the way?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
people I've bought pens from, sold pens to, people whose collections I've inspected, and some of the major collectors all over the world, mainly a major collector in San Francisco, a major collector who's since passed away in Bremen in Germany, a couple of collectors in Bremen, various collectors in Italy, especially in Florence.
You told me this funny story once about the Montblanc that became the model for the.
In the late 70s, I was friendly with the people at Alfred Dunhill, Richard Dunhill himself. And when he left the company, when he sold the company, it was the chap that took over as CEO was called Lord Duro. I went along to see them one day. And, I was told by my contacts at Dunhill that Lord Duro wanted to meet me. That was what they told me. I'm not sure if it was true, but in any event, I turned up at their office one day. I was shown up into his office with my cases full of beautiful, what I consider to be beautiful pens.
Ah, they look pretty beautiful.
I think you can see it. It's falling on the floor. And he was standing out in his office with these acrylic pieces of modern Montblanc, which are very impressive, but not looking quite so beautiful. And I showed him all my pens, and he didn't seem that interested. So we were chatting about them and talking generally. Suddenly he said, "Wait a minute, what's that pen there?" "What pen?" "That one there, silver one. That's a Montblanc." "Can I have a look at it, please?" He said. I said, "Yes, of course." And I showed him a beautiful octagonal Montblanc, sterling silver from the 1920s, as a safety pen. And he was rhapsodizing over it, saying how beautiful it was. "If we don't make anything like this now, do we?" I said, "No, you should, shouldn't you? But you couldn't even have the craftsmen there nowadays." "That's interesting." "Can I borrow it for a while?" "Yes, of course." So I lent him the pen, went off to Germany and showed it to some people at Montblanc. He said, because he said to me, he did know that at that stage Alfred Dunhill owned Montblanc, they just bought it. And he was rather certainly sad to learn they didn't have the craftsmen to make the pens anymore. So he took the pen over to Germany and showed it to the people at Hamburg. And 3 or 4 months later, first the modern limited edition pen was introduced by Montblanc.
Mm.
It was Lorenzo de' Medici, which was a scaled up version of the pen that I'd showed him. Exactly the same pen in a larger size. That was the first of the Rutter series of the modern limited edition pens.
Well, you wanted to show us some pens.
Can you see the size of this compared to, say, the size of this?
Yes, much bigger.
Those Watermans or Montblancs?
This is a more safety from about 1910.
I was going to say that's a safety pen. I have a small version of that. I've never seen one so huge.
A gigantic nib.
Huh. My gosh. Is that would you say that's a size 6 nib?
More like a 10 or what's known as a 10 or a 12.
Oh, 10
Yeah,
12.
that
12.
would hold a lot of ink in there.
They're really for pens for stenographers. If you're sitting in court all day, you have to take down every single word that said. You can't have a pen that runs out of ink. That's why they would make a pen with a gigantic capacity like that. Waterman's version was called the 20. It was also known as the Prohibition pen because it was possible to hide alcohol in a pen like.
You clearly are a huge advocate of pens before the war, right?
Yes.
Well, I have to be honest. I love like Parker 51 and I like Lamy 2000s and I like modernist pens. Is that something that you have since become more interested in, or do you still feel that that's, not so interesting to you? Or
I like all beautiful pens, but the most thing, one thing I particularly like about pens is when they write beautifully,
ah,
when they make your handwriting look nice. And in my view, this is only my view, my opinion may not be worth much.
right,
I think that a pen with a stiff nib writes in a kind of a boring fashion.
right,
Yes.
yeah.
Although some pens, of course, don't write. People still love them and collect them. For example, Anotos. The Anoto has a very complex mechanism with a rubber washer that's almost always gone hard and two little cork washers around the seal at the end of the pen, which are
Uh-huh.
often broken as well. And for many years, it was not possible to get those pens working because you couldn't get the seals. Sooner or later, people discovered how you can manufacture your own seals and your own cork washers. So it started working again. But most people that collect Notos and Delaros don't expect them to write.
Have you found that any of the attempts at creating flexible nibs, in the last 20 years have satisfied you in any way, or do you feel that those pens, when you think, for example,
Yes,
Pilot makes
very
some
good
nibs that are
question.
flexible, have you
We are
tried
getting
those?
we are getting there.
Uh-huh.
We're definitely getting there. I would have said up until a couple of years ago, no, all modern pens have boring, stiff nibs. But more recently, a lot of companies have gone out of their way to produce pens that have interesting nibs. Some companies have always done that. OMAS has always produced or given the option of a pen with a flexible nib.
Hmm.
The trouble with flexible nibs, of course, is that if you can sell a pen with a lifetime warranty, when companies started producing pens with lifetime warranties, such as Schaefer, they started finding that they had to produce pens with stiff nibs, and they started emphasizing the smoothness of the writing with their pens rather than the flexibility in the nib and the style of the writing.
Um, so what's your favorite pen? What are your favorite pens?
Well, for what purpose? To balance in the hand, to write, to look at?
Well, if
Uh,
let's
uh,
say that you could only if you're in a lifeboat and
Yes.
my
had to
favorite
And you
pen is
need to
probably
write in your lifeboat when you're writing your
lifeboat
last will and
scenario, which
testament.
pens would you keep?
my favorite pen is probably the Waterman's 554. It looks like this,
Oh, look at that. That
four
is
size.
beautiful.
It's in solid gold or silver, of course.
Oh, yeah, that's the one that
And
I saw.
the end is
Solid
covered.
gold. So it's not gold layering, it's solid gold.
No, solid gold. It's a not too heavy to write with, but it's certainly a hefty pen. It balances nicely in the hand. I have fairly large hands, but it still balances quite well. And the writing is beautiful because the gold is so heavy that it pushes the ink into the
Oh,
paper.
could you bring that one up to the camera and
So
show a close
you
up?
end up with a flex.
Yeah, and what is the date on that? That's a big pen.
1925.
That would have been quite a large pen for that time,
Oh,
right?
yes. It's only a four size, but it is certainly very large indeed. There's a sixth version of it, which looks vaguely similar. I'll show you. Hold on a sec.
But in solid gold, I mean, even at the time, it must have been an extremely expensive pen, right?
Oh, yes, I'm sure.
How did you come across that one?
This one walked into a Philadelphia pen show about 20 years ago, and I bought it from the owner. This is the sixth version of that pen. It's even larger.
Do you think the fountain pen changed the way writers wrote? I mean, does anybody talk about that? Particular writer who,
I don't know. I've never heard anyone suggest it did. I know
well,
that.
it must have, though, right? I mean, if you didn't have to keep dipping a pen into the ink, it had to have affected the way in which you wrote, I would think.
Well, it made life easier for stenographers for sure.
Yes, that's true. Because you don't have to pause so much, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So the pausing actually, could have affected the way that people thought, like their actual thinking process, right? And suddenly
Yeah.
you don't have to pause so much. Presumably, the speed with which you wrote would be changed. I mean, I know anecdotally that there are certain writers who have said, for example, Tony Kushner has talked about how he uses a fountain pen and how important it is to use it, and that it's been very, wonderful thing. I mean, I know certain writers have celebrated fountain pens. That's the way I feel. I wouldn't keep a journal if I wasn't using a fountain pen. It's gives me excuse to use a fountain pen, and I love the very thing that you were saying you don't like, the smoothness of it, the ink just
Oh, I
going
like
over the
smoothness.
page. But
No, I do like smoothness of a nib.
okay.
Just think that it should be smooth and flexible.
But you like it flexible. I have many flexible pens, but I don't use them for the most part in my journal. Somehow I don't know. I just like it to come out in a broad, simple way. But what I'm saying is that somehow or other it does affect my writing, I think. The very fact that you can't change it, don't you think? That's another way of thinking about it. If we're in an age where we have a computer where we constantly, every sentence can be changed easily, when you write a sentence with ink, it's not so easy to change it. You have to scratch it out.
You're right. Certainly, it's certainly the case that we're using a computer makes writing very much easier.
Well, easier, but also maybe also it interrupts something, it changes something. I don't know if these were things that you think about in terms of how a fountain pen affects you, perhaps in terms of how you, because I know that you write very beautifully. Well, here's a good question. When you wrote your book, did you write it with a fountain pen or did you type it on the computer?
No, I couldn't use a fountain pen at all.
You didn't use a fountain pen when you wrote it at all.
No,
Ah,
it was not practical at all.
interesting.
It was all done on a computer.
See, I would have done the same. You're admitting this. I would have done the same thing. I mean, when I write, I write, for the most part, I write with a computer.
You had hired Pierre Gustafsson to do a few writing samples for you.
Oh, yes, he did the writing samples for the books. That's right.
So when do you use a fountain pen?
Just for occasional writing.
So when you write letters or
When you write letters, you use a fountain pen. When you're writing notes, you use a fountain pen.
cool.
You're signing things, you use a fountain pen.
But when you're doing sort of serious writing, you still use a computer.
Yes, I can't write with a ballpoint either.
The wonderful thing about the fountain pen community is that there's so many different voices, so many different people, right?
Yes, yes, that's right.
You talked about how you discovered in the 70s that there were these people who were, what that world was like of people beginning, collecting fountain pens. How have you found, there's an explosion now of people like me and Andrew, right? I mean, what do you think about all that? Is that horrifying to you or is it kind of
No,
wonderful?
it's
But,
wonderful. I'm very wonderful. I'm very impressed by it.
ah,
Very impressed with the people are writing with these pens. Fortunately, I think there's a lot of publicity that can be done on the subject because very few people out in the real world, not just our world, but the real world, know what a fountain pen is. They know what it is, but they don't know that it can make your writing look different. I've had, for example, a number of doctors whose writing is absolutely terrible. And I say, well, try writing with this. And I hand them a pen with a beautiful flexible nib. They start writing with it, and suddenly they notice, wait a minute, suddenly my writing is legible. So I said, yes, you can't write badly with a fountain pen. It's much more difficult. Much easier to write beautifully with a fountain pen.
that's really cool. That's interesting to improve doctors. Famous doctors are famous for their bad handwriting, Andrew. Is that true? Andrew being a doctor.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, the evolution of my signature devolved over time for sure.
The
Well,
more prescriptions you write.
I have to log off soon, but my last question was going to be, what would you advise to? So I've been using fountain pens for many years, but I've just gotten into collecting fountain pens for the last year. What kind of advice would you give to someone starting to build a collection, starting to collect pens? What's your personal experience been? What kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to get into the hobby?
Well, there were two ways in which it was done originally. Back in the 70s, people and 80s in England and in America, and probably in Italy and Japan as well, people would start collecting pens by the manufacturer. I collect Parker, I collect Waterman's, I collect Montblanc business. Nowadays, people don't do, and back in those days, they would want to get every single model of Junior that they could, every model, every color. And they would show you trays of fountain pens with blanks in them. And you say, well, what's that blank doing there? They say, oh, that's where my Junior yellow goes when I find one. Nowadays, there's not so much interest in getting every single model of Parker Vacuumatic or Waterman's Ripple. People just tend to buy what they like the look of.
Here's my schizophrenic collection that I keep with me when I go to work. We've got 4 149s with different nib sizes. We have an Omas pen right here with sterling silver.
Yeah. That's nice.
And then we have a Pelican M800. We have a Montblanc Bohème. We've got the pen that I purchased from you at the New York Pen Show, which is my flex nib. And then we've got a Waterman. I think this is a Waterman 6. And then I've got Visconti Homo sapiens. So this is kind of like the case I bring with me everywhere. It's got a little bit of everything.
Are there questions that you wish that people asked you?
Only where can one find vintage pens?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the question everybody's asking, because they're so difficult to find. Luckily, the point about vintage pens is that most people don't realize they're collectible. So if they see one in a drawer, they wouldn't necessarily think of bringing it out or selling it or showing it to anybody. So there are still pens lying in drawers all over the country.